Hi, everybody. I'm Skip Elsheimer. And if you've been watching for the last couple of days, you'll say, "Gee, Skip, you've been wearing the same shirt." It's because I've pre recorded all these intros on the same day and haven't even taken a shower yet. That's what we're doing here at AV Geeks. Anyways, yeah, so we watch old 16 millimeter films. I'm Skip Elsheimer, if I haven't said it already. But yeah, so I'm traveling, but I still want to show you guys 16 millimeter films, and we have some that you haven't seen. Today's show is about behavior, films about behavior, specifically behavior is in the title of each of the films we'll be showing. So we'll be starting off with Learning About Human Behavior, a Cornet film. Then Learning and Behavior, and I think we're going to have some Skinner in here, and some Shaping with some pigeons pecking at some things. Then we're going to end it with an amazing film that I love to show. I discovered it. It's called Neurotic Behavior, a Psychodynamic View. And it is basically talking about neuroses and how it portrays itself in a college student who is afraid of girls. Essentially, that's how it plays out. It is wonderful. Some people watch it and said, this is just psychobabble. Psychodynamics, I guess, is a way to kind of think about behavior. And I feel like it's a step away from pseudoscience, but it probably, I don't know. I'm not keeping up on the literature, but anyways, it is how it plays out it's just a wonderful film. But thanks for tuning in today. Like I said, we're in Canada and having a great time, but we will see you live at some point when we come back. In the meantime, hit the thumbs up button, hit the like button, go to ko-fi.com/avgeeks to buy us coffee. We will use that coffee in Canada, that money that you donate to coffee. Also, you can go to patreon.com/avgeeks, or you can donate via the super thanks button. Thanks for today. We will see you live soon at some point. All right, enjoy.
The study of human behavior, trying to find out why people act as they do. Investigations that reveal more to us about ourselves, that begin to answer the question, what is a human being from a psychological point of view? Some psychologists are concerned with physical factors in human behavior. One describes his work.
Our tools and methods are like those of a physician. We have devices we use to measure physical reactions, to analyze blood and the secretions of ductless glands. We've learned that the nervous system matures relatively slowly. We've learned that people have innate forms of behavior, reflexes. If your eyes blinked, that was a reflex. A child's toes curl when the sole of his foot is rubbed, also a reflex. We've found that learning depends on physical as well as mental considerations. For instance, a certain physical readiness has to exist before a person can learn to read. Many of us believe that before age 6, the average child can't learn to read no matter how much training he gets. But around 6, reading readiness occurs. Vision, hearing, and language become coordinated, and he learns to read.
Human behavior in terms of physical development. Other scientists investigate perception, how the human organism selects information from the environment.
Our test provides stimuli people can see, hear, or feel. Standardized test cards. We know how thousands of people have responded to them over the years. And a variety of bells, alarms, timers, and other devices that produce and measure stimuli. Using them, we've learned about the concept of focus, how a person's attention is focused on certain stimuli. What do you see? The average person focuses his attention on the ball carrier. He barely perceives the many other details. Focus often shifts. Do you see a white vase on a black background? Now, as your attention shifts, do you see black profiles of two people facing each other? We've learned that no matter how confusing the clues are, a person's perceptions make size, brightness, direction, and depth seem logical and consistent.
The study of perception in human behavior. Other behavioral scientists investigate learning.
We use a number of tests, puzzles, and problems to study learning. Nonverbal tests do not require a knowledge of language. Verbal ones do. Some experiments provide a reward for one sort of answer and punishment, such as a mild electric shock, for another. Can you learn the path through the maze? Can you find your way through this maze any faster if we tell you that your response will be graded by your teacher? Whether or not your teacher actually graded you, it's a fact that the two learning tasks were equally difficult. The difference was that the promise of grading may have increased your motivation to learn. Also, the first maze gave you practice in solving the second one. We found that motivation, practice, repetition, and concentration are important in learning. Many of the experiments we use are based on the work of Ivan Pavlov, a Russian physiologist. Pavlov inserted a tube in a dog's mouth to drain off saliva. A bell was sounded when food was offered to the dog. A dog normally salivates over food, but in time this dog salivated at the sound of the bell, even with no food present. This type of learning is conditioning. Some believe it's the basis of all learning. Learning experiments often have practical aspects. For example, the rotary pursuit test is used by the Air Force to examine certain aviation aptitudes.
Other scientists study human emotions.
An emotion itself can't be seen or measured, but polygraphs and other devices help us recognize emotional responses, changes in breathing pattern, the electrical conductivity of the skin, blood pressure and pulse rate, blood volume and oxygen content. Using these techniques and asking people to describe their emotional feelings, we've learned that the tendency toward some emotional patterns is probably inherited. But the way emotions develop is probably learned. Were you startled? The startle pattern is both an emotional response and a reflex. Normally, the eyes of a startled person blink, and the mouth widens in the suggestion of a grin.
The study of emotions. Another investigator studies intelligence and aptitudes.
The tools we use are intelligence and aptitude tests, the kind that are given in many schools. Some require a person to arrange blocks in a particular pattern. We believe fast, correct performance indicates intelligence. Other tests call on people to recognize similarities and differences. Which of the 6 figures to the right look exactly like the one to the left, except for position? Which of these figures look exactly like the one to the left, except for position? We believe that many such test items together can give a profile of intelligence and aptitudes. Testing many people, we found that a person's problem-solving ability is related to language, the ability to generalize, and a number of other factors. We plot test performances of a number of subjects on curves. The high point on a curve indicates the score most frequently earned on a particular test. And we assume that people who earn similar scores resemble each other in certain important ways.
Intelligence and aptitudes. Social behavior is investigated by other scientists.
Our point of view is that people are uniquely human because we gather in social groups. A street gang, a football team, a family, all are social groups. Even the class you're in now is a social group. Every group has leaders, followers, special roles that people play. The role of the clown, the role of respected elder member. Every group has ways of rewarding people or punishing them. People who study social behavior may investigate and report on social systems that exist in all groups, hours to come and go, ways of getting other members' attention, and so on.
Now, all of you in the group, raise your right hands high.
Did you consider me a leader for your group? Maybe you'll want to discuss why you did or didn't react. Who, if anyone, moved first? Who looked to your teacher or friends for approval?
Social behavior. How people behave in groups. Studying your class, your club, your family, you can understand the work of scientists who investigate social behavior. Their study, along with studies in intelligence and aptitudes, emotions, learning, perception, and physical development, reveal to us more about the ways in which we think and act, human behavior.
Apple.
This child is using a new educational device. In geometric forms, she goes on to match letters of the alphabet. The pigeon is matching the same geometric forms that the child matched. It's also learning a new skill. Child and pigeon. Today we shall find out what they have in common. Pigeon can help us penetrate the mysteries of human behavior. Conquest. the search for new knowledge about our universe, our world, and ourselves. I'm Charles Collingwood. This is Harvard University's Psychological Laboratories. What is behavior? What makes a man love, gamble, write a sonnet? In this laboratory, scientists seek answers to those questions using pigeons to stand in for human beings in their experiments. We'll watch science exploring the control of behavior in just a moment. This is Dr. B.F. Skinner, professor of psychology at Harvard. His area of particular interest is behavior. Dr. Skinner, what are you doing with this pigeon?
I'm getting ready to demonstrate a fundamental principle of behavior. The apparatus is quite simple, but the principle is far-reaching, not only in explaining the behavior of pigeons, but in analyzing human behavior. This pigeon is hungry, and I can give it food just by pressing this switch, which operates a small food dish back of the square opening in the wall. The principle I want to demonstrate is called reinforcement. It's what the layman usually calls reward, although that term doesn't fit too comfortably in many applications. This point is a quite simple one. Whatever the pigeon is doing, when I press this switch, it will tend to do again. And in that way, I can select parts of its behavior and make it do practically anything I like.
Well, now, what sort of thing can you make them reward?
Try to turn the bird around counterclockwise toward you. Every time it moves its head around this way toward you, I'll pick that up. And with a little luck, we ought to have a complete turn in very little time. I'm waiting until the head moves this way and then reinforcing. I want to wait for a somewhat bigger turn. That's enough, I think. It takes a little skill to anticipate just the move you want to reinforce, because this must occur at the very moment of the response. We're getting the beginnings of a counterclockwise turn. There we are.
Yeah. Come on, pigeon.
A little bit more and he'll go all the way around, I think.
There, I made it. That didn't take him very long, Dr. Skinner.
No, that's pretty fair. It varies a good deal because, of course, I have to wait for the behavior in order to reinforce it. People don't realize this, especially in working with children. You must wait until the child does something to reinforce it to get the effect.
And you feel that this kind of reward or reinforcement plays a very real part in human behavior as well as that of pigeons?
Very definitely. We have not as much experimental evidence with the human subject, but we have a good deal. And the principles that have emerged from this kind of research do hold remarkably well.
Now, a pigeon, of course, is simpler than a human being. How complex can you make pigeons' behavior?
Well, it's a matter simply of my own patience. You can slowly shape almost any kind of behavior. 2 or 3 years ago, in a classroom demonstration, just to see what we could do, we designed a little piece of apparatus in which 2 pigeons could play ping pong. The 2 pigeons are at either end of a small ping pong table. One pigeon pecks the ball as it comes toward him and knocks it the other way. The other pigeon eats. So that there is it's a real game. The pigeon is reinforced for a cross-court shot if that is what gets the ball past his opponent.
That's remarkable.
Of course, we're not interested in behavior because it's amusing or dramatic. We want to study its causes and find out how to change it. Actually, our experiments are run automatically by rather complicated equipment. Each of these panels contains relays, timers, clocks, and so on, which turn on stimuli, arrange for reinforcement, and record the bird's behavior. Each panel controls an apparatus in the next room. Here are 20 boxes, each of which contains complete equipment for studying the behavior of a pigeon or any other small animal. Here, for example, a pigeon is being put into the apparatus for its daily run. In this case, we are studying how behavior changes when we make the pigeon more or less hungry. By feeding it different amounts of food daily, we can change its body weight and study the effect of this on its behavior. In this box, we're studying the color vision of the pigeon. We reinforce it for pecking the key when it is and not when it is another. This work is related to research on those substances in the eye which enable us to see color. No one really cares about why pigeons peck discs. However, it enables us to study the behavior because the response will operate automatic equipment to record and program sequences of events. A paper tape simply moves very slowly over this cylinder, and a pen will move one small step across the paper as the pigeon responds. The bird then draws a line, the slope of which depends upon how fast it's going, enabling us to follow changes in the bird's behavior over a period of time. All this apparatus is run right around the clock, and as a result, we record and analyze hundreds of hours of behavior every day on a wide variety of subjects. Perhaps if we went to the laboratory of my colleague, Dr. Herrnstein, we could see something a little closer to the actual experimental work that we carry on in these laboratories.
We've reinforced the bird for pecking when the light is on, but when the light is off, the bird is not reinforced for pecking. As you see, the light comes to control his behavior. When the light is on, he pecks. When it's off, he doesn't. This process we call stimulus discrimination. The control exerted by that light over the bird's behavior can be very strong, as you can see.
Yes.
There are comparable situations in human behavior. We've learned to cross the street when the light is green and not to cross the street when the light is red.
Well, some of us have, Dr. Herrnstein. There's still a good many people who cross the street on a red light.
That's because they get away with it occasionally.
That's true.
If we let the bird get away with it, he would do it too.
As a matter of fact, that's a good example of another type of work we do here with this particular type of experimentation. The things we do in everyday life don't always pay off, intermittently reinforced. And there are various schedules according to which what we do can be reinforced intermittently. We study that, in the case of the pigeon, by arranging schedules or systems of payoff.
The bird is on what we call a slow-down schedule. In order to be reinforced, the bird must wait at least 10 seconds before he pecks. This indicator here shows the seconds going by. It has to go all the way to 10, and then a peck is reinforced. If he pecks too soon, he must start waiting all over again.
It takes a lot of patience.
This is a very hard schedule for any sort of animal.
Including man.
He made it, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Can you build this bird up to a fixed ratio?
Well, I'll try.
What do you mean by a fixed ratio?
Well, that's our term for what in industry would be called a piece rate or piecework pay.
The bird is reinforced for every 10 pecks he makes. There he is reinforced.
And you feel, Dr. Skinner, there's an analogy with piecework in a factory to this?
Yes, the human worker is often paid off in terms of the number of items he produces, the number of times he operates a press, something of that sort. As a matter of fact, a very similar schedule is a sort of piecework where you can't quite predict the next payoff, but one will occur in time, and that is the heart of all, the so-called variable ratio schedule, which is built into all gambling devices and produces with human subjects, just as it does with pigeons, a very high disposition to continue to operate a device, like a slot machine, and a tendency which, by the way, continues a long time in extinction when the device no longer pays off at all.
Now, you're trying to deduce laws of behavior for all organisms from this kind of work. Would you say that this lack of free will in the pigeon also means that human beings don't have free choices in what they do?
Clinical psychology, scientific psychology, economics, political science, and so on, all contribute to the total evidence that there are external causes of human behavior which, in a sense, do explain the behavior. Now, we are by no means in position to argue at the moment that all human behavior is controlled, but that would seem to be the goal in which scientific research is drifting.
And that a human being has no more real control over his actions than, say, a molecule does under the pressures that exist in its environment?
I think that's a worthwhile assumption. Where these techniques have been tried on human subjects, the same kinds of results are obtained.
Of course, the kind of behavior that you've been analyzing is pretty primitive behavior. Are you able to produce and to analyze more complex behavior?
Dr. Herrnstein has been changing his apparatus, and perhaps we can see an example of a fairly complex process, the kind of thing which in man would at one time have been called a higher mental process.
Now we have 3 keys. As you can see, a stimulus pattern appears on the center key that's either a cross or a circle. The bird must peck this form, and then the 2 forms appear on the 2. The bird must then peck the same form that he had just pecked in the center. That he's reinforced. We call this matching to sample.
Now, that's pretty complex for a bird, isn't it?
It is a rather complex form of behavior.
He's doing very well. Now, what does this complex behavior on the part of the pigeon teach you about the behavior of humans?
Well, there's a perfectly simple parallel. Here is a similar device which can be used to teach a child to match patterns, forms, colors, and so on. In fact, it can be used to teach reading. In the early stages, a child begins by matching patterns like these, which are very similar to those we saw in the case of the pigeon. At this point, the child is reinforced simply by operating the machine and moving on to new material. At a later stage, she's matching letters, first simply as geometrical form, but later as genuine letters in the alphabet. And at a still later stage, she is selected which correctly describes the pictured object.
Dog. Duck. Duck.
At every stage, operating the machine
Apple.
brings new and interesting material into view, and this is enough to reinforce the child so that she will continue to work for long periods of time. Eventually, in this way, she acquires a considerable reading skill. This is our self-instruction room. These students are studying with the aid of a device which is based upon very similar principles to the one we've just seen. I think the best way for you to see how it works is to try it. Here is a set of materials designed to teach the very principles we've been talking about today. This first frame has a word missing. It's up to you as a student to read it and supply that word by writing it on this strip of paper.
All right. Performing animals are sometimes trained with rewards. The behavior of a hungry animal can be rewarded with food.
Well, you put it down, and the machine will tell you. Now lift the lever aside. Your answer is now under a transparent cover, so you can't change it. We don't trust you. And the true answer has appeared there, and as you see, you are right.
It says food.
Since you're right, move the lever to the right. That means that that particular item will not appear again as you go through this material, because you've answered it correctly. Now put the lever back in the original position, and the second item appears.
A technical term for reward is reinforcement. To reward an organism with food is to reinforce it with food.
Well, see what the machine says.
Reinforce. Pull this up. Reinforce.
That's right. So you move it to the right to record the fact that you got that right, and go back. There's the next item.
Technically speaking, a thirsty organism can be reinforced with water.
Right. I shouldn't tell you that because the machine is going to tell you.
Reinforced. Note, not reward.
Not reward. Reward would have been wrong because you were asked to speak technically.
Right.
Now you notice how small each step is. You don't make very much progress, but you always make some. And you are almost always able to make progress. The student does not study before he comes to the machine. The machine teaches him the whole story. And each step is so small that he is almost invariably right, even though this is unfamiliar material.
Now, is this as effective as reading a text or listening to, say, Dr. Skinner give a lecture?
Well, it's much more efficient, I'm sorry to say, than the latter, and I think also than the former. The student, we're studying with a text. He has to read. He doesn't know whether he knows it yet or not. He's looking forward to that hour test a month away. And the only reinforcement he gets from this is something which is very far in the future. With this, he knows immediately whether he's right or not. And our students report that they do this with no feeling of effort. They don't need to force themselves to study. And they retain, as far as we know, even better than in the other type. And the saving in time is very great. I don't have figures to support this, but I would risk the statement that with this type of arrangement of material, you can learn the same amount in about half the time with half the effort.
Now, this is a good deal farther advanced than what the pigeon was doing.
This is verbal behavior, and the analysis of verbal behavior in these terms is quite complex, I'll admit. However, there are certain elements of similarity. We do insist upon quick reinforcement. We insist upon the slow development of new forms of response so that each step can be taken and is then reinforced.
Reinforced by my feeling of pleasure, of accomplishment that I've got it right.
Well, I wouldn't allow myself to say it just that way, but you are reinforced by your success. And I think it's a very gratifying characteristic of human behavior that success is itself reinforcing. We don't need to give you gumdrops every time you're right on this.
Now, with a machine like this, or with this technique of yours, about emotions, have you done anything on emotional training?
Well, that is a very difficult problem. You're quite correct. This is only concerned with verbal knowledge. And I'll admit that education should face the problem of emotional training, too. We are doing some experiments which seem to offer a beginning of an advance in that direction. And perhaps if you'd like to see them, we can go back to the laboratory and I can show you an experiment which at least suggests the possibility of an approach to the problem of emotion more or less in the same terms. The pigeon is not known for its aggressive tendencies. On the contrary, it's a classical symbol of peace. But let's put two doves of peace together.
Oh, they're fighting.
They are, and quite viciously. In fact, I can't leave them together very long, or they will hurt each other quite seriously. Now, if these were two boys in a street gang, this would be a social problem, and many kinds of answers would be proposed to it. If you assume that this is some basic physiological pattern of aggression which has to be treated as such, the solutions are very difficult. Therapy would be a very extensive sort of treatment. However, these birds were not always aggressive. In fact, at one time they were quite peaceful. What happened to make them aggressive, I can show you by putting in another bird to exhibit a kind of reinforcement which produced the results you've just. Now this pigeon When the green light is on, as you see on the word on the wall, this bird is occasionally reinforced for attacking the other. Meanwhile, you see this bird is protesting peacefully. The aggressor is aggressing because of what he gets out of it. Now, when I change a stimulus, I've turned off a green light, and you will see that the other pigeon, although it occasionally attacks, is much less aggressive. Now I turn the light back to green again, it will fight in order to be paid off.
Now, why is that, Dr. Skinner?
Well, it's just like the experiment in discrimination we saw earlier. In the presence of a green light, attacking this bird pays off. In the presence of a white light, attacking the bird does not. You'll see a little aggression, but it is still, you see, pretty much under control.
Yes.
Now, with the green light, it comes right back and attacks again.
Yes.
When we first started this, we observed that the aggressor was behaving in a perfectly cool manner, very much as if he were pecking a key on a wall. But as this behavior develops, it becomes more and more emotional. It shows the physiological pattern. The feathers fluff up.
Do you suspect that human beings are taught aggression in the same way?
I think they are. I think you can see that they are both as individuals and as groups or even nations. There are many instances in which one is reinforced for attacking another, and in the world of the green light where that reinforcement prevails, we aggression. There is a possibility that we can construct some kind of world with a white light in which no one is reinforced for being aggressive, and there's just a possibility that in that case we wouldn't have the problem of aggression to deal with.
Thank you, Dr. Skinner. We'll be back in a moment. Today we've shown how the behavior of a simple pigeon can help science understand the complex behavior of man. The fictions that we invent to explain nature are much more flattering than the truth. Nobody liked it when the Copernican system elbowed man out of the center of the universe, or when Darwin showed that embarrassing link to the lower animals. And now we're being told that all our actions are determined by our environment. Some that this is true. This new knowledge should make it possible for man to raise himself to new heights of kindness, intelligence, and happiness. This is Charles Collingwood.
Peter Mason, a college senior, having planned an encounter with a young woman whom he finds attractive, then behaves in such a way as to prevent the relationship he wants from developing. We call such inappropriate, self-defeating behavior neurotic. Most of us have, on occasion, regarded someone we know, perhaps at times even ourselves, as neurotic in some degree. In fact, some psychologists argue that everyone in our culture is neurotic. But what does neurotic mean? What is neurotic behavior? And what causes it? To shed light on these questions, we will examine the symptoms that lead us to regard Peter's behavior as neurotic, and will probe the underlying mental forces which we believe motivate that behavior. The point of view we will assume is termed psychodynamic.
So there's not really that much difference at all, really.
Okay, well, I gotta go to bio. I'll see you.
All right, take it easy. See you later. Take it easy. Hey, you know that girl Lisa, the one who used to go out with Rod?
Yeah?
All right, well, she's been pumping me for information about you. You know, like who your friends are, you know, what kind of things you do, stuff like that. So she told me that tonight she's going to be at the bio lab.
I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know?
Well, those things never work.
Well, you got to be kidding.
Yeah, I guess I should. I'll go over there tonight. I gotta go. We'll see you.
Our premise is that, during early childhood, Peter was, in psychodynamic terms, traumatized by painful experiences resulting from the harsh disciplinary methods employed by his mother, particularly in relation to her over-concern for cleanliness. Now, elements in his adult environment threaten to reactivate the unconscious feelings associated with this early set of bad experiences. The psychodynamic approach strongly emphasizes unconscious motivation. Behavior is seen as the interplay between active or dynamic mental forces, both conscious and unconscious, and environmental circumstances. The ultimate source of neurotic behavior is to be found in unhappy and unresolved relationships early in our lives. When later environmental pressures threaten to reactivate the sense of pain and loss we unconsciously associate with such childhood experience, the mind contrives defenses. Those defenses, used in excess, are signs of neurotic behavior.
Peter?
Excuse me.
What happened? You ran away so fast I didn't know what
I
happened.
spilled the ink on me. Look, I'm filthy. I tried to get the ink off. It's ruined. Christ.
Oh, come on. You can get another shirt. Look, what do you say we forget the library for tonight? We go over to that concert.
Oh, no. I couldn't. I mean, I've got to try and get this shirt clean. You know what I mean? I gotta go.
What we are watching are the obsessive-compulsive symptoms of neurosis. As you have probably guessed, the obsessions and compulsions that affect so much of Peter's behavior suggest some overriding, exaggerated need for cleanliness. In order to probe the dynamic processes which initiate and sustain these symptoms, let's go back and take a closer look at Peter's behavior earlier in the day. Here he prepares himself to go to the library, fully aware that Lisa will be there. At this point, we are going to take a trip, a highly impressionistic one, into Peter's mind. Here, in the dynamic arena of the neurotic processes, images from Peter's external experience travel through his consciousness away from us to the inner recesses of Peter's self. These external experiences activate images from Peter's subconscious. The images coming toward us are Peter's memories, fears, and fantasies. Here, Peter appears more tense. He is experiencing the major precondition of neurotic behavior, anxiety. Anxiety is not, in itself, neurotic. In the psychodynamic view, every culture, in every age, and our own in particular, induces some degree of anxiety in every one of its members. The difference between normal and neurotic anxiety lies in how a person copes with it. If we function adequately despite our anxieties, we are usually considered to be normal. However, if anxiety hampers our life functions significantly, if we are unable to deal with it, we are probably neurotic. Peter is manifesting several of the classic symptoms of anxiety. His face is tight, his posture stiff, his breathing and heartbeat accelerated, and he is perspiring freely. He is fearful, jumpy, and irritable. Something in Peter's environment is cueing this rush of anxiety. The image of Lisa causes a painful memory, indicated in green, to surface from Peter's unconscious. The image of his angry mother is so laden with anxiety that Peter's unconscious fights to protect him from the pain of it. The image is repressed, barred from entering Peter's consciousness. Repression, a defense mechanism, is one of the major processes of neurotic behavior. However, repression isn't totally effective. As you see, even though the image is repressed, some of the anxiety still reaches Peter's consciousness. These vestiges of uneasiness and apprehension are known as free-floating or diffuse anxiety. Such diffuse anxiety has a marked effect on Peter's behavior. His overreaction to the stain is an indication of Peter's inability to cope with his anxiety. The stain affects a change in the flow of images. The upset in Peter's life is reflected in his mind by the increased intensity of images traveling toward his unconscious. They cue even more threatening images. The unconscious evolves another defense mechanism: rationalization. Like repression, rationalization functions as a guard against the pain of anxiety. Unlike repression, rationalization allows the image to pass into consciousness, but alters it to make it less threatening. For example, Peter's unconscious rationalizes the ink to be waterproof rather than washable. Another instance of rationalization occurs when Peter's unconscious increases the size of the stain on his shirt. These rationalizations serve to improve Peter's self-esteem by increasing the magnitude of the problem, thus justifying his irrational behavior to himself. Defense mechanisms are an enormous drain on time and energy. The more they have to be evoked, the greater the constriction on life's experience. As we have seen, the cue for Peter's agitated state was the stain on his clothing. In the psychodynamic view, irrational concern for personal cleanliness can, and usually does, have its roots in childhood, specifically in severe, punitive methods employed in toilet training. In that perspective, residual images and feelings from that traumatic episode early in Peter's life are contributing to his present behavior. Peter is trying to rationalize his behavior to Lisa as well as to himself. It simply doesn't work. Here, Lisa invites him to the concert. The invitation induces panic. The idea of going to the concert activates more anxiety-provoking images. They press with greater urgency toward consciousness until still another defense mechanism comes into play: displacement. Displacement acts as an inhibitor of anxiety-laden images. Displacement transforms painful images into less painful ones. Displacement protects Peter from anxiety by focusing his attention on new, less threatening images. Displacement is often a major defense involved in the formation of phobic symptoms. A phobia is a pathological fear of some specific object or situation. Peter's phobia is against crowds of people. From the images and memories stimulated, it seems he fears that the people in the concert audience will dirty him, contaminate him with their filth. The fear of crowds, called oculophobia, seems to Peter himself an unreasonable condition, making him act in ways he wishes he did not have to. But the fear overwhelms him, and he is compelled to tell Lisa he can't go. At this point, a number of forces are affecting Peter's behavior: the phobia of crowds, the compulsion to avoid groups of people and the anxieties they stimulate, the free-floating, diffuse anxiety and the nonspecific apprehension and uneasiness it generates, and the strong desire to rid himself of the dirtiness he feels contaminates him. The anxieties, the defense mechanisms, and phobic symptoms keep Peter from doing what he wants to do. By cutting off many avenues of experience, they severely limit his life. In psychodynamic terms, Peter has now given way to the symptoms of obsessive-compulsive neurosis. Defense mechanisms are working harder, but they are inefficient. They are failing to protect him. As more and more anxiety-laden images pervade his psyche, Peter seeks to defend himself against them with an obsessive-compulsive ritual of hand-washing. Peter is washing clean the anxiety-provoking images that arise from the unconscious to threaten him. At length, the images begin to lose their urgency, and the anxiety subsides. For now, Peter is protected, defended. In the psychodynamic view, then, neurotic behavior is essentially defensive, the result of excessive activation of mental defense mechanisms to the point that they interfere with the normal functions of life. Many of us undergo brief, inconsequential episodes of neurotic behavior, and all of us, even the least neurotic among us, experience manifestations of repression, rationalization, and displacement intermittently in our lives. They reduce anxiety, but we pay a price for that service. Defense mechanisms also reduce pleasure. A total absence of defense mechanisms is unimaginable, but with self-awareness, we can learn to recognize them, limit their occurrences, and lessen their constrictive effects on our existence. In so doing, we would make ourselves more vulnerable to anxiety, but we would also deepen and enhance the quality of our lives. Is the risk worth taking? It is implicit in the psychodynamic view that often the risk is worth taking.
Thanks, everybody, for watching today, even though we were pre-recorded. As always, you can support us by hitting the thumbs up or the like button. Those are great ways to tell the algorithms that drive our post-literate, automated society that AV Geeks deserves to live at least another day. Another way you can support us is going to ko-fi.com/avgeeks or patreon.com/avgeeks. There's a ways to buy us coffee, or what's happening more recently is we're buying shelving, we're buying things as we are moving films from our nasty basement at the archive to better conditions so that we can potentially renovate the basement and make it climate controlled and waterproof and all that stuff. That's more about that as it happens. There seems to be bigger powers at work besides us that are determining whether or not this can happen. Another way you can support us is just watching the channel, and because we get ad revenue from many of the videos, and believe it or not, we're making enough ad revenue that we're covering the storage unit costs. We have now 4 storage units. So thanks again for tuning in. We'll be back again the next business day. This is a pre-recorded message, so I don't know what day we're going to be showing this, but tune in, and we will see you soon. Everybody take care. Bye.